Hope is an important concept in order for us to make it in this life, especially in times like these. We are familiar with those life experiences that cause us moments of discouragement, frustration, and even being overwhelmed. If hope is such a valuable tool for us, how do we respond when hope does not seem to work? When hope seems hopeless, what hope can we have? Tonight, I'd like to take you into a journey in looking at 7 times in life in which hope seemingly does not work, but an explanation as to why hope fails in these instances. The goal is for us to examine whether or not we find ourselves in one of these particular instances and learning to overcome them so that we can revitalize our hope. So let's take both a practical and a biblical account of why hope does not work. First, sometimes our hope does not work because we're thinking about our plans and not God's purpose. We get frustrated because we want what we want instead of remembering it's not about what we want, it's about God's purpose. You remember in Isaiah chapter 55 and verse number 8, we are reminded, my thoughts are not your thoughts, says the Lord, and my ways are not your ways. As the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts. So always remember to focus on God's purpose and not your plans. Second, hope does not work when we fail to see opportunities for self-examination, personal growth and maturity, and humbleness. Many times we want God to fix our problems and fix the people and fix the circumstances of our existence. It's always a desire that something or someone else gets straightened out. Have you ever thought that God's trying to straighten you out? Remember 2 Corinthians 13 and verse number 5? The Bible says, examine yourselves. See if you're in the faith. Prove your own selves. Doesn't tell us to examine others. And sometimes God does not work despite our repeated prayer requests for the things that we specifically ask for, because we may fail to see an opportunity to examine ourselves, an opportunity to grow and to mature, and to perhaps become more humble. A third time that hope seems hopeless is when we are impatient with God's purpose, God's priorities, God's plans, and God's process. We can, in some sense, think about the fact that God is working, but in other ways, it just seems like He's not working fast enough. Ephesians chapter 1, verse number 11 says, in whom also we have obtained an inheritance, being predestinated according to the purpose of Him who worketh all things after the counsel of His own will. You know what that means? God doesn't need our recommendations. He does not need us to consult Him. He will work all things according to the counsel of His will. We have to be patient with His purpose, His priorities, His plans, and His process. Another time that hope does not seem to work for us is when we're not doing our part. So often we want God to do everything. And he'll do those things that are within his capacity, but he also has an expectation that we will do what is in our capacity. For example, you remember the familiar narrative in Exodus 14 and verse 15 in particular, when the Lord tells Moses, "Why are you crying to me? Speak to those Israelites and tell them to go forward." Why would the Lord say such a thing? Because they were at the Red Sea and Israel was murmuring and complaining. And it was not in their capacity to part the Red Sea, but it was in their capacity to get to marching and moving in faith. Sometimes we don't get what we desire from the Lord because the Lord is not getting what he desires from us. Another time that hope seems hopeless is when we do not understand our inability to control others, especially when it comes to, say, our children or grandchildren, but not limited to them. We easily get frustrated with other people. We have an idea as to how they are to act, how they are to speak, what they are to do and not do. We have to remember at the end of the day, we do well to control ourselves, let alone trying to control adults. When it comes to our, say, children or grandchildren, assuming they are of adult age, we have to remember, as much as we love them, as much as we care for them, you have to let adults be adults. Because we have had over the years some sense of authority over them and respect from them, it can be overwhelming and frustrating that as they come of age, that we don't seem to have the same authority or the same respect from them. While we can offer counsel and guidance, we have to love them and let them do the things and be the things to help them find their way. In the narrative of the prodigal son, for example, in Luke chapter 15, verses 11 through 32, put yourself in that parable and see a father who could see his son getting ready to make some serious life mistakes. Sometimes we have to remember there's a difference between taught knowledge and bought knowledge. And while we look at them and need to be discerning on when to interact and engage, sometimes we have to let grown people be grown people. Another time that our hope seems hopeless is when we have an earthly perspective and not an eternal perspective. We have to learn how to look beyond right now and look beyond the temporary things of this life. Colossians chapter 3 and verse 1, the Bible says that we have been raised with Christ. As a result, we are to set our hearts, our affections, our thoughts, our desires on things above, where Christ is seated at the right hand of God. Set your minds on things above, not on earthly things. We have to gain an eternal perspective, because the devil will use those things that we so often focus on to distract us and to disengage us. Last, hope is hopeless when we're not exercising faith. We have to trust God and believe in God. The Bible tells us, and we're so familiar with Hebrews 11, verse number 6, without faith it is impossible to please God. Sometimes people come to me for counsel about choices they must make. Should they take this job or that job? Should they move? Should they stay? Should they speed up? Should they slow down? I often say to people, Many times the answer lies not in what's behind door number 1 or door number 2. The answer lies in how you open the door. Do you open the door from human will and human emotions and human intellect, or do you open it with faith? See, sometimes it's not a matter of if you go left or right. It's a matter of if you are making your decision based on trusting God. I'd like to encourage you that if you have a decision to make, to step out on faith and step in faith and watch how God will work wonders in your life. I believe in hope, and I hope that you have hope, but also be cognizant of the fact that sometimes we get in the way of our own hope. Check these thoughts that we have mentioned tonight. When hope seems hopeless, it may be that God is hoping that you'll see yourself and do some things different. This has been another installment of A Few Minutes with the Minister.